Right, in today's growth story, we're chatting with Guy. So, Guy, you and I must have known each other now for at least 5 years, potentially 6 years. But we'll just gloss over the years because that makes me feel old. But you head up the award-winning Xebra Accounting. You were one of Xero's first MVPs. For those who don't know what that means, was most valued professionals. And also you're a member of the club's advisory board. I think there's a lot people want to hear from you, Guy, and I think some people want to know how you're able to offer that profitable bookkeeping service, which I know is at the heart of your industry-leading practice efficiency. And I've never seen a practice run in the same way as yours. And you know, that's a genuine, that's not a superlative. You've recently put in place a fee increase so that everyone went up by 25% without any client leaving and only one client querying the fee. And I think other people will be interested in how you grow your clients from a starting fee of 200 odd pounds a month into about 500 pounds per month. So, Guy, great to have us with you. Do you want to give us a quick potted history of your firm, such as what prompted you to start it? What's your current turnover? So just people can get a bit of a context of how big or small your practice is.
Good afternoon, Heather. It's good to see you again and to have a chat. And hello to everybody else who's joining our conversation this afternoon. I'm down in well, it was raining a few moments ago, but the sun's back out again now on the south coast between Portsmouth and Southampton. And I've been down here for 35 years now, having trained up in Nottingham, and then found that there was not a lot of job opportunity in the East Midlands. It was the time when the textile industry was collapsing and every other client was a textile, making jumpers and underwear for M&S and the like. So we moved down south, and eventually I became a partner in a small firm locally, which was gobbled up by several acquisitions. I ended up being a partner with BDO, and had a unique sort of partnership portfolio with sort of half of it being corporate and half of it being the family owner managed business, and that's the area which I particularly enjoy. I came across Xero back in 2012. I happened to bump into the guys from New Zealand that came across to sort of suss out the UK and meet their, I think he was their first employee, Darren Glanville.
Wow.
And Darren wasn't there at the time, but I met the New Zealand guys, and we were just chatting literally out in the street in Southampton. It was most bizarre. And I said, why don't you come along to my office? And we did. We had a coffee and we chatted. And you know, from that very first meeting, I thought, my goodness me, this is something that's going to be a game changer. Because to me, you know, I trained to be an accountant. I trained to help people, to help them and to improve their businesses, whether it's making more money or making more time for the family and getting a sufficient return or whatever. And so the compliance work, which so many accountants seem to get bogged down with, wasn't really what interested me. It's wanting to have those chats and to see what I can do to help and make a difference. And one of the biggest handicaps to that was the lack of information. You ask clients for information, and if you were lucky, they had it on what was good old Sage Line 50 at the time, and you got sort of 13 floppy disks of data. So it literally took not minutes, but hours to get yourself ready for a conversation. And then you'd find that the quality of the Sage was really, really poor. So to have this ability to actually see what's going on with clients was, to me, a game changer. And I decided to leave BDO. I worked for another firm, helped set up an office in Southampton, another large firm. But all the time I was actually wanting to get back to my roots, which is the owner managed business. And then eventually I set up on my own with Xebra Accounting, and we've got a turnover of about £500,000 now, and it's a cloud-based practice. We use Xero behind most of what we do. We still have some Digita which is rapidly reducing as we can use more of Xero's products. And everything's been on the cloud for the past 5 or 6 years, apart from that tax and accounts compliance software.
Brilliant. So I think just let people know, in case they're wondering, that there's not, you have 9 people, but actually that's about 6.5 full-time equivalents you don't source. So apart from your commitment to the cloud and Xero, and the commitment to put everyone on Xero regardless, what decisions did you make in the last 5-6 years that truly accelerated your growth?
I think the things that changed life early on were looking at things in a very different way. It was not just using something like Xero as a the next evolution of software, but actually looking at what it can do and what it therefore enabled you to do differently, and what you could cut out from the traditional way of working. I think that they actually committing to the product, to Xero, was a major change. One of the things we had in the earlier days, apart from everybody asked about security, and I've not heard that question for years and years now, but one of the things that we struggled with was just getting people to have the confidence to make the change. So what we used to do, and I worked with Darren, who I mentioned earlier, with it, and is actually put people on Xero whilst they were still on whatever they were using, be it spreadsheets, manual, even Sage. And then when we had the next meeting, sort of annual meeting, we showed them the accounts on Xero compared to what they already had. And literally 80-90% of the time, people would just say, wow, that's amazing. Can I actually see things like that? And they can, of course. So we introduced it sort of by the back door by actually putting people on before they asked to go on. And we still do that today. So if we get a new client coming in, they will come in because they want to go on to Xero, because that's what we do. We don't take on new clients who are going to stay on a different system for any length of time. We put them on and run it alongside their own system for a short time if they're skeptical. Some we just change straight away, but others are much more skeptical about anything, and actually get them seeing what it does. And over the last 10-12 years, I've only had one person who's actually said, I want to go back to where I was before. And that was somebody who had a huge number of stock lines, which frankly was above the limit that Xero could sensibly work with. So they went back to what they had at the time. So it's sort of getting them used to it and showing them what it can do. And it's very much an education process, and it always has been.
And I just wanted to jump in here, because I think you said something and it was just tossed into the ether that I think is absolutely key here, and fundamentally underlines what you've done with your practice efficiency. If your working processes do not look materially different to before you use cloud products, then you've basically engineered in inefficiency into your system. This isn't just a case of remove the desktop software, whether it's QuickBooks Desktop, Sage 50, add in your Xero, your online thing, and then move on. The big thing is to actually sit there and challenge yourself to say, if we can now see all the data and we have a permanent record that we can all see, what don't we need in our working papers? And I think that bit is fundamental to your practice efficiency, because people just don't do that. They plug and play and stick the other software in, and oh wow, right, we're now on the cloud. And I think that's so important, is that mastery of what you're doing with the software, and also really challenging each step of the process, and to go, do we need to do that anymore? So one of the things that you challenged and turned around was from most of us have our focus of delivering the year-end accounts, but you're not focused on delivering the year-end accounts. Yes, you do it. Don't get me wrong. I know you do it, but you're focused, and one might say obsessive, about getting the books accurate. So talk to me what you mean by doing that.
Well, I think the starting point of that is actually looking at statutory accounts and saying, do these really mean anything to anybody? And although I'm an accountant, I don't think they do. They're hard to read. They don't give you the information that an owner-managed business person wants to have. Therefore, we've thrown out statutory accounts, if you like. They're not our focus. What we are our focus are, I'll call them management accounts. It doesn't matter whether they're monthly, quarterly, or even just once a year. But they're, what I mean by management accounts is then is a set of accounts which you can tailor to the client. It doesn't have to be tailored much, but it's coming off zero. It's pulling lots of figures together into like types. You may only have 4, 5, 6 overhead categories to try and make it more meaningful rather than a list of 100 nominal codes. It's about having something that you can talk to the client about, say whether it's a monthly talk or a quarterly talk or just an annual talk. And we do everything on zero. So when we come to do things like stat accounts, it is quite literally grab the figures off zero and plug them into Digita or transfer them electronically, whichever you want. And our statutory accounts are ready an hour later. We don't do any messing around at that. We also look and say, well, what's the point of doing working paper files? Most accountants I speak to still seem to use Excel packs that they've either bought or made themselves with all their lead schedules on and etc. Why not use zero and just do a report which is a lead schedule report? That's what I've got on mine. So we can print off the lead schedules directly from zero, and we can have it on a item by item, your nominal ledger by nominal ledger item, grouped as it will be in a set of statutory accounts, or however you want to do it. But the information's all there, and you don't need to be pumping it into Excel to produce year-end files. But what do you need? It's a snapshot of the year end. Well, we've got the VAT returns on, we've got the fixed assets on, we make sure we put on loan agreements, we put on HP agreements and the like, so everything is on zero. We do some on zero's working papers, which are fine, but there's an awful lot of work of time which you can actually take out of the equation to make it more economical and to give yourself more time to be talking to the clients at those meetings that you have.
And I think this goes back to the point again, it really emphasizes that actually with whether it's Xero, whether it's QuickBooks, whether it's Sage Online, whatever, you actually have all the information you need. And if you could, free agent as well, and actually, as you say, if you can go in and tailor the reporting so it matches up with the schedules that you need to put into your accounts production tool or your tax return tool to process it, as you say, you don't need this extra spreadsheet, you don't need this extra step. And I'm just going to answer a few questions that I know the answer of. Yes, I know that Guy uses Dext very much so, and it's one of your tools that I'd have to fight you for you to let go of. It's one of your favorites. And Jerry, I know that Guy has a standard list of points. In fact, he's very checklist driven. And we'll come on to talk about that he looks at with each client when they have a monthly and a quarterly meeting. Absolutely. So how do you do all of this stuff with only 6.5 FTEs? What are you, so we've talked about the fact that you're continually focusing on what adds value, what doesn't add value, using the data you already have to get the schedules, to stop the uploading, downloading as much as possible. And as you say, as soon as Xero Tax does what it needs to do, you're hardly going to need to use Digita. But what are some of the other things that you do? So, for example, you have some quite strict rules with clients, such as clients don't get a chance to resend in information. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't think I probably fully answered the last question when you asked about the bookkeeping side. I do see the need to have great bookkeeping as absolutely fundamental. And my goal is to build a practice of 200 clients paying £5,000 or £6,000 on average each. And the way you get to that is by having delivering more than one service. So you're not just delivering year-end compliance and tax returns, but you're doing, say, bookkeeping as well. And probably 3/4 of our clients we do some bookkeeping for. Now that could be on one extreme virtually everything, but if you're using Xero or similar products, the clients are going to be doing some of it, even if it's only raising the sales using the sales function. So we finish it off, and we actually take it from wherever the client takes it and finish it off. And that's at the other extreme may mean that the clients always get a review as a minimum to make sure that the bookkeeping is okay and that every month it is closed down and up to date. And then that brings you to the perennial problems of getting the information from clients. And we, like so many things in accountancy, you chase and you chase and you chase, and you end up sending lots of letters or lots of phone calls, but it doesn't get you anywhere, because if they haven't responded to the first request, they don't respond later on usually. So we actually have to look at it and say, well, how can we get that information from the client given they never send it to us? And then you start moving into why don't we pick up the phone? Accountants traditionally like to be engrossed in their work and send out emails and send out lists of things that need sorting out. But it's actually, why not pick up the phone and say, look, it's the 1st of April, we've got your bookkeeping to do, you've got a VAT return due from up to the end of last month, then we've got your payroll. So can we, when will you have the information that I need available? And while we're on the phone, can we just look at Xero and go through everything on the bank rec? And we put in notes or post it up as we're talking. And that 10-15 minute conversation probably does half the work. Because we've set the scene, and we've also made sure that we will have the payroll information on the 20th of the month. And we've also agreed that by the 5th of the month, there won't be any more invoices to go on the system so we can do the VAT. And we've cleared most of the stuff that's on the bank reconciliation already. And it comes back down to what I call smart bookkeeping, looking at how we can actually do the work quickly and how we can move on when the clients don't help us. So, one of my mantras is pick up the phone and ask the client, just ask the client all the time, where's that bit of information? How am I going to deal with it? And you do have to at times make decisions about whether they're VAT registered or not, but you've got to keep closing it down. It's no good having 4 months worth of bookkeeping open. You've got to close each month down. If you don't, you get yourself into a right pickle, which is exactly what clients do with their own bookkeeping, get themselves into a mess because they can't finish anything off. That's what we do. And that's where our expertise is. And we're using technology to help us to do that wherever we can.
Yes, so for example, Bala might want to know, but actually you target your bookkeepers on the auto publish percentage rate, DEX precision scores, and for anybody that's, and I know this comes back to this fundamental looking at as a whole of how do I get the most efficient way while still delivering service. So for example, you'll set up the chart of accounts to enable you to get a higher percentage that you can auto publish through. So that, yes, as you say, there might be more categories that things can go through to. And I know you still haven't sussed the Amazon receipts problem that all of us hate, that you can't auto publish, but pretty much everything else has a category of its own. It's really clear to see, and it's set up so the business owner wants it. And there's something else I want to pick out with here, is that I'm not sure whether people kind of really got it. So I just want to emphasize is with that phone call you do, you're finding issues in real time, and you resolve them there and then, rather than unpick it at year end, which is inefficient. Because what normally happens is the bookkeeper will send an email out weekly that goes, by the way, can you let us know what's happening with this? They may hear, they may not hear. That then drifts on to the next month, which then drifts on to the next month. And as you know, a phone call can push that through. And so So a couple of things really that you're turning on in the head is your primary route to clients is phone rather than email. As you say, your big thing is you close down the month at the end of each month. So by the time you get to VAT ends, year ends, you can just press the button, can't you? You don't have, because most of us at year end time then have to get the client to send all the stuff, try and work out the 12 months of history that's not been updated. Then you've actually got to find all the missing invoices and the bits and pieces and the incomplete records, which, if we're honest, is a bookkeeping role that hasn't been done. And then we put it through Digita or Tax Calc or Zero Tax or BTC. And then people wonder why we spend potentially days on year-end accounts when actually we don't need to. So, one of the things that I think people are interested in is, this sounds all very good, but what has stopped your growth with the benefit of hindsight?
I think we would have grown more if I'd been a bit younger.
Damn this age thing.
I am looking to retire in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years time. So I think there's an element of that. But no, I think, part of it is that when I started this journey, I looked to do a merger a few years into it, and we did, and then it didn't proceed as I wanted to, so I pulled back out again and started all over again. So I seem to be making a habit of just building up from nothing to wherever I get to. So that's probably part of it at the end of the day. I think the other part of it is actually finding staff is really difficult. Finding good team members is incredibly hard. I don't want people who are going to be locked into the way they've been trained and done it all their lives, if you like, in the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
I want people who will embrace the, if I say, disruption, the new ways of doing things, and who are happy to talk to clients, and so many people aren't. And therefore there becomes a point where actually sometimes people are better for you if they've got the personality to talk to clients and were willing to learn the bookkeeping rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think bookkeeping and accounting has changed, and we're very much into the people contact profession now, compared to, even when I was training, it was still very much an insular environment. You'd walk into an open plan room of accountants and it looked as though there were 20 people all in their own little micro climates, all individual, not talking to each other. Whereas now we're always talking to each other and asking how to deal with things, and have you got a way of dealing with this and that. And that, and again, in the last couple of years has made growth harder, because we've not been so close to each other. With remote working, and we're hopefully getting further and further back to working back in the office. And it's not that I don't agree with remote working, it's just that actually so much of what we do relies on having a group of people together who can actually exchange ideas and get through the problems that are occurring. And of course, we're all on the job training as accountants. We always have been. We're always learning. The technologies are changing. Flipping heck, every 6 months there seems to be something new comes along of significance, or some additions happen in your DEX processes or your Xero or whatever. So you've got to keep on talking, and you've got to keep on working together to get the right results.
And I think that's another kind of thing that I want to emphasize. If your bookkeepers are not absolutely talking daily with the accountants, then you've got a problem. A question for Bala: Xero and DEX would be the best option to grow the best profitable practice. Not always. There are other softwares out there. It just so happens that Guy and I are particularly fond of Xero and DEX, but something like Sift Analytics has got a very, very good service offering that is starting to rival Dex Precision. You know, HubDoc is getting better and better as each day passes. You know, the pricing on Dex, shall we say, is variable depending on, I think, how much their shareholders are wanting at one time. And you know, can be quite expensive. So it just so happens a lot of people use these, but whatever. So I just want to talk bookkeeping, and I'm just very conscious of time. Is I know you, with bookkeeping, to keep it profitable, you aim to get £60 an hour, but you charge on a number of transactions, so £1.50 per transaction with steps of 50 transactions. Unlike most people, everybody's on daily or weekly bookkeeping, you know, and this, as you say, as you've said to me, that if a client loses a receipt, that if it's lost after 7 days, it's still not going to be there after 7 months, you know, so you don't tend to chase those missing receipts beyond the first kind of, by the way, have you got these? You also have this high proportion, you set up your chart of accounts to facilitate a very high level of auto publishing. You use Dex Precision to keep an eye on bookkeeping quality. Now, you have a very hands-on view of bookkeeping. So what happens if a client gets behind? What do you do next?
Well, it's back to having conversations, but depending on where those conversations go, you know, but that's not my bottom line, but I will always say, just go out and see them.
Yeah.
Go out and sort out what's going on, go out and pick up the stuff that you need, go and have a chat with them and find out why they've got a problem, putting the information together. If we've got a problem with a client, I don't want it to be there next month, because otherwise it'll be there the month after and the month after that. And suddenly, you know, you get to the end of the year and you realize you've spent 3 or 4 times what you expected to on the client and haven't made any money. So it's about nipping the problems in the bud before they become a bigger problem.
Yeah.
If that means that they need twice as much bookkeeping time, you just tell them and double the fee.
Yeah, and I think one of the really important things is your bookkeepers are not number crunching people, so they will actually help clients with their processes so that stuff comes through where it needs to be, and say stop silly things happening. Like you said to me that the hairdresser would reconcile every single invoice to every customer, to every receipt that went through the till, you know, and as you explained to them, that was unnecessary. It just needed to be the takings at the end of the day. And you know, it's your bookkeepers, yes, that they've moved from just monkey see monkey do to really controlling and working with the clients really proactively to control the flow of information in. You know, they're not processors in your world, are they? They're problem solvers and that sort of stuff. So
it's really important that they work with the accountants and client managers that we've got too, because if they've got a problem and they don't know how to sort it, that's what they do. Because again, we don't want to not have that problem solved. And sometimes they need to talk to somebody who's got more experience or whatever to actually unlock the issue in that particular client.
Yeah, and you know, I've worked with many bookkeepers who've of course been very good bookkeepers, but I know the standard bookkeeper's way of working is each week these are the missing receipts. You know, it's very rare that they'll pick up the phone and go, this one's always consistently missing, let's look at what's happening. Right, can we sit there and get that filter set up into your, you know, so it goes immediately into Dex, so we're not missing it. So the last question, I know we're running slightly over, so my apologies, is you do annual fee increases, we know that, but you put in a 25% increase in 2021. And you weren't on the cheap part of the scale. You properly charge for the service you've delivered. So what prompted this increase and how did you sell it to clients?
I think there are a number of things that prompted it. I mean, we didn't have a price increase in 2020, first year of COVID.
You did.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were still starting to fall behind. We also put in Go Proposal during the early part of COVID as well, because I felt we had inconsistencies with how we were pricing for different clients. And of course, getting that put in place helped to realize where those inconsistencies happened. And we found that it wasn't that we had a client who we were particularly massively undercharging, but if you took their bookkeeping or their accounting or just the advisory time, the meeting time, one of those three sort of key sections was probably mispriced. And the net result was we ended up, I think it was actually a 27% increase in our fees. And because we put them all up to the highest common denominator of all of those issues.
Yeah.
Because like we were getting the fees from somebody, we didn't push them particularly up. We just made sure everyone was paying the highest of our ranges, if you like, in bookkeeping, in accounting, and in sort of advisory and meeting time. That, you know, it made a huge difference. It's incredibly warming when you see an extra £4,000 suddenly come in one month, which was just pricing.
Tell me about it.
or whatever the amounts were, you know. So it's so it was sorting those inconsistencies out, and also trying to just get through to the fact that getting the bookkeeping right is so important, and making sure that we weren't overspending time. And again, I felt we were overspending time compared to what we were charging for bookkeeping for many clients, because it was proving more difficult than we envisaged, shall we say, at the beginning or when we set the price. And a lot of the increases were actually in bookkeeping time, because the good thing about good bookkeeping is it actually helps you keep the cost of other things down anyway. And that could be a massive, massive help.
And I know some of the ways you sold it was, you mentioned we're using industry standard software to price your work. And, and when you kind of go, and the computer says, they go, okay, then if they're getting the service. I know that you also talked about, COVID has meant we're spending more time on your affairs. This hasn't dropped. This is now the future. We didn't budget for this. We now have to. And as you say, I think, as you said, you lost one client that was £100 and something a month. But as you said, shouldn't have been your client with you. We're going to open it up to questions for another 5 minutes. And I know we've run very late, which is unlike me, but I can see the number of questions coming through. So if you want to ask a question to Guy, please put it in the chat box. I've got two, one from Jerry and one from Rebecca. So do you use timesheets, Guy?
We don't use timesheets in the sense of we're not a timesheet recording practice. We do have a time recording system, Harvest, which is available if people want to use it. And I say it like that because it's only there to help people. So if a bookkeeper is concerned about the time they're spending, they may well go on it for a few weeks to see how long it's taking to do things. And then they can have a chat with other people or the team leader or whatever to help them understand where they are spending too much time or whatever. And sometimes if we use it because the client's bookkeeping is quite literally taking much longer, and we want to just establish the pattern before we go to the client to actually talk to them about an increase in fee. But we're not underlying, I don't do a timesheet ever. And probably half the office have never done one in their life.
And I think timesheets have their place. I think if you've got a decent profit margin going through, you've got the luxury of not necessarily needing it, but then, as you say, use it on an ad hoc basis if you suspect that there are some problems. But if you've got, several of our members when they joined did not have that luxury of the profit margin like yourself, Guy, and they very much put in timesheets because they needed the granular detail of where were they losing the money. So a question from Jerry, how many transactions can you expect a bookkeeper to process per hour? Oh, interesting question. Does this vary from bookkeeper to bookkeeper?
I mean, I think the answer is yes, it does vary from person to person, inevitably. And I think part of it is that my bookkeepers aren't sitting down for an hour processing transactions as a rule, because they are just facilitating the process of processing of transactions, because we're using technology as much as we can to do that work. They will be clearing through the bank reconciliation. They will be spending some time pushing behind the scenes on Dext or whatever to push the transactions through. But it's very rare to actually sort of sit down and say, well, I've got 300 transactions to do. How long is it going to take me? We don't end up with those sort of numbers usually. But I think you can probably expect a bookkeeper to get through 60 to 100 in an hour.
Yeah, because the ones that you can just go reconcile are easy on Xero. It's
Yeah.
the ones where, you know, it's
Where you can't.
Yeah, which are always, you know, if you can auto publish 80-90% of your receipts, then actually you're doing a management by exception role, which is where you want to get to with cloud accounting. So we've got Ballas. What would be the best software for pricing? Now I'll answer this. So you've got two kind of real marketplace contenders at the moment with what I would call pricing. You've got Go Proposal and you've got Practice Ignition. Go Proposal is probably the only one that gives you the facility to put a number of variables and the computer says X. It then goes neatly to a nice looking proposal. Yes, there's problems with it, but actually if you're not doing anything, I'd say that the best pricing engine is probably Go Proposal. The best billing payments engine is Practice Ignition. Now with Practice Ignition, you know, if you know kind of, if you've got a little bit of a spreadsheet that kind of goes, right, you're this size, that means that, and you've got templates set up in Practice Ignition, you can do most of what you do in Go Proposal. And the nice thing about Practice Ignition is it integrates incredibly nicely, so does Go Proposal, but you can, at the point that the client signs the engagement letter, you've got the payment set up, you've got the invoices going back and forth from Xero. There's no touching it unless, of course, you want to. And you've got automatic reconciliation going through. So in terms of future efficiencies from the point that the client joins, Practice Ignition wins hands down. In terms of the ability to put in this number of transactions, which integrates nicely with Dex Precision, that really tells you in real time how many transactions, you've got to go Proposal. So our members are on both. So a question from Rod: how many of your staff are pure bookkeepers?
For the last couple of years, we've been equal in the sense of 2 full-time equivalents of bookkeepers, accountants, and client managers. Actually, I see our growth coming in bookkeepers over the next couple of years, because it's back to the attention to the detail and getting that posted correctly on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So I'm expecting that the ratio will go out at the bottom with more bookkeepers coming in relative to accountants, and the accountant number will probably drop, and the client managers doing the discussion will also increase. Because one of the other things about fee increases last year is, which I didn't mention, was that as you become closer to your clients, surprise, surprise, they become closer to you and ask you more questions. And therefore you have to charge them more for the availability of that advice, and the fact that you're dealing with stuff on a day-to-day basis with them and having far more conversations than you were beforehand. So part of the increase last year was actually to put in a few £100 of extra fee, shall we say, just to cover those ad hoc conversations.
And I think that's a big profit hole for so many practices. They don't budget properly for day-to-day conversations, day-to-day queries, day-to-day whatever. This amazing catch-all of free email and telephone support provided, which typically is bundled into the year-end accounts fee, which, as if this whole discussion has been about turning it on its head. What is it that clients really want? What is it they really value? Yes, of course, you still file year-end statutory accounts, but it's not really part of what you major on. Whereas for most of us, that's the thing that we do. So Bala has said best practice management software. Bala, it really depends on what size of practice you are, where you want to get to. So if you're going to remain small, so under 5 people, and you want a good workflow tool, I'd recommend Pixie. Does what it's very good for workflow and automation of reminders, and reasonable for reporting. If you know you're going to grow to more than 5 people, you've got to be looking at typically Centre or Carbon. Our members get 10% off their first year with Centre or Carbon. Carbon is probably the better one for the task management. Centre is probably the better all-rounder in terms of visual job planning boards, in terms of the dashboard, but you really can't beat at the moment. Carbon is very, very good at task management, workflow, the automation thereof. So I hope that's helped you, Bala, with that question. Now, for those of you that have just been going, oh, what sort of levels of transactions do I need to get out of my bookkeepers? How do I price this? Then I shall segue into, we've still got 5 places left. They are the last 5 places. I've just put a link to this. Come to our workshop next week on the 28th of April that we're running in conjunction with Ignition. Jeremy, the one that's good for tiny practices that want to stay tiny, and I really mean want to stay tiny, because it's an arse to move practice management systems, is Pixie. And by the way, I get no kickback for saying that, but that is one that a lot of our small members that want to remain small and not get beyond 5 sort of people will often be on Pixie. For those of you that have been listening to and inspired by Guy, particularly around pricing, on bookkeeping, then come to our workshop, which is on the 28th of April. It's a full-day workshop. Carl Reeder will be detailing exactly how they price and their pricing methodology for D&T. Plus, we're going to be getting down into the detail. Bala, yes, as part of our members get advice and support all day long to win quality clients. We have a new business accelerator program that we run twice a year, and our members that go through that program typically put on between 30 and 100 grand in the 14 weeks that they get the accountability. So absolutely, Bala, we do help with that. Bala, if you've got no clients at the moment, yes, of course we can help you, but it's very much more of an investment. So Guy, thank you very much. We've run badly over, which I really need to smack my hand for, because I pride myself on being on time. But how can people get in touch with you, Guy? I know that there's going to be people that will want to follow up with this. What's the best way of people getting in touch with you?
Drop me an email. It's just simply Guy, G-U-Y, at Xebra Accounting, Xebra with an X, of course, with a 0. So zebraaccounting.co.uk, or contact me through LinkedIn.